in the midst of a deadly snowstorm. A wealthy man and a stranded bride find each other under the worst possible circumstances. She, a lost and exhausted woman, on the brink of survival. He, a seasoned man with thousands of acres of land but a heart full of loneliness. Their fates collide on a freezing night, surrounded by thick layers of snow. What will he do when he meets the abandoned bride, who has no idea she's standing at the edge of life and death? And could it be that his life will be changed forever after that night? Have you ever faced loneliness so intense you couldn't see a way out? What would you do if you found someone in such a desperate situation? Would you help them, or walk away in fear? Now, imagine, if it were you, what would you choose to do? Don't miss this emotionally charged story. Stay tuned to discover the answer to this question. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories like this. In the American West, where the winter winds can cut through skin, where the snow falls thick, burying the land and erasing all traces of life, lies Redwood Hills, an isolated, desolate area far from the bustling cities. Here, only the sound of the wind sweeping through the hills, over vast fields, and past lonely homes can be heard. The weather is harsh, with long, bitter winters, but it's this silence and pristine beauty that draws in those with strong, resilient souls. Jack Dalton is a man who lives in the stillness of this land. He's not a local, but years ago, he decided to settle in Redwood Hills when life's events pushed him to seek a quiet space to rediscover himself. As a millionaire, with vast farmland and many smart investments, Jack has everything a man could dream of. But none of that can erase the loneliness gnawing at his heart. Jack's farm sits on a large plot of land, with old wooden fences, stables, and a simple yet sturdy wooden house. From inside, Jack can see distant mountain peaks and endless fields of snow. Every morning, he wakes up to the ticking of an old wooden clock in the living room and the faint sounds of horses in their stalls. His home, though warm during the cold winter, is filled with silence almost as if it's carrying a deep sorrow. For over 10 years, since the tragic car accident that took his wife and daughter, Jack has lived a life of solitude. He can't forget the warm moments with his family, the laughter of his wife and daughter echoing through the house. But now, all that's left are memories. No one could ever replace them, and no matter how hard he tries, he can't find peace within himself. For Jack, silence isn't a choice, it's inevitable. He doesn't go outside much, doesn't interact with anyone, just focuses on his work. Occasionally, he gets letters from old friends, but everything seems too far removed from him. One winter evening, after a snowstorm had swept through Redwood Hills, Jack sat by the crackling fire in the fireplace. The house was quiet, with only the faint crackling of the fire to be heard. His coffee had long gone cold, but Jack wasn't in any hurry. He sat there, silently, watching the flames and thinking about his life, the mistakes he made in the past. It felt as though everything had become meaningless, alone in the dark night, with the howling wind outside. The snowstorm had raged all day, and even though Jack was used to the cold, the silence and isolation still made him feel uneasy. Sometimes, in moments like these, he'd hear the sounds of objects cracking in the wind, almost as if they were crying out in pain. The sighs of the wind, the biting cold, and the blood-soaked memories. As night fell, Jack stood up, stretched, and walked over to the window. The snow was falling heavily, covering everything outside, and the world had turned into a blur of gray. The sky was pitch black, with only the dim light from an oil lamp flickering inside. A faint sound slipped through the window, both clear and muffled, as if someone was calling out. At first, Jack thought it was just the wind, but a strange feeling made him hesitate. He placed his hand on the cold glass of the window, sensing the eerie stillness from outside. His heart raced. It could be the wind, but no. Something inside him urged Jack to act. With a swift decision, he grabbed his thick coat, took the oil lamp, and stepped outside into the snowstorm. His hands were numb from the cold, but his heart burned with something he couldn't explain. Step by step, Jack made his way toward the strange sounds. The storm made everything hazy and dangerous, but he didn't turn back. That nagging feeling wouldn't let him quit. And then, as he neared a corner of the farm, the light from his oil lamp illuminated a horrifying scene. An old overturned carriage, its cover torn apart by the storm's strength. And, beneath the thick snow, a weak figure lay motionless, a woman. For the first time in years, Jack felt his heart race. The familiar feeling of empathy surged within him. The woman was shivering, barely able to breathe. There was no one around, no one to help her. He bent down, his hands trembling but determined, and picked her up, holding her tightly to his chest. He vaguely realized he had just saved a lost soul in the middle of the snowstorm. This woman, an arranged bride, abandoned in the ruthless wilderness. The snowstorm still relentlessly swept through Redwood Hills, blanketing everything in a cold shell, creating a hazy, desolate space. Inside his wooden house, Jack Dalton carried Sarah Whitaker in, closed the door behind him, and gently placed her on the couch near the fireplace. Though his own hands and feet were numb from trudging through the thick snow, he paid little attention to that. What concerned him more was this girl, who had collapsed in the storm, unaware of where to find salvation. Sarah was breathing weakly, her face pale from the cold. She wore a wet coat, her hair frozen, sticking to her forehead. Jack immediately took off her coat, wrapping her in the warm blankets he kept around the house. He threw more logs into the fire, trying to warm the air around them, hoping Sarah would recover quickly. Jack wasn't accustomed to this kind of care. Over the years, his life had mainly revolved around farming, livestock, and managing his properties, but today, seeing Sarah in her fragile state, needing help, something inside him wouldn't allow him to leave her alone. He quickly grabbed a cloth to wipe her face, gently massaging her hands and feet to stimulate blood circulation. After some time, Sarah began to stir. She opened her eyes, her mind foggy, as if she had just woken from a long dream. The surroundings were blurry, but she could feel the warmth of the fire. She looked around and saw a tall man standing next to her, his eyes filled with concern as he watched her. Sarah tried to sit up but immediately felt dizzy. "Don't try to get up," Jack said softly, helping her sit back. "You've got a bad chill. Rest for a bit." Sarah looked at Jack, her eyes tinged with sadness. She couldn't quite understand everything yet, but from the moment they met, she felt sincerity in his eyes. It wasn't the coldness she'd seen in other men throughout her life, but kindness, a look of understanding she had never felt before. Who are you?" Sarah whispered, her voice still weak. I'm not supposed to." "It's okay," Jack interrupted gently, stroking her forehead to help her relax. "You got caught in the snowstorm. I just brought you somewhere warm. You're in my home. My name's Jack Dalton. Sarah tried to recall what had happened before, but all she could remember was darkness. She remembered a difficult journey, letters from Caleb Dillard, promises made, and ultimately the disappointment of not finding him where he said he would be to meet her. Sarah didn't know where to go next, and those promises now felt like cold flames, leaving her all alone in the snowstorm. Caleb, Dillard, Sarah murmured, but her voice caught. I came here for him. He promised he'd meet me. Jack felt a surge of anger rise within him, but he didn't show it. He had heard about Caleb Dillard, the man who sent countless letters to brides arranged by mail, only to abandon them when they arrived. It was a tale all too common in these parts, where lonely men sought wives through letters, only to leave them behind for one reason or another once they met face to face. He left you, Jack said, his voice low. It's not your fault. Sarah looked up at Jack. By now, there was some life back in her eyes, though she still seemed tired. She knew she couldn't change what had happened, but the pain inside her heart was still raw. She remembered her mother, who had hoped that finding a new life in the West would be Sarah's one chance to escape poverty. Her mother had sent her off with hope. But now Sarah felt like a traveler abandoned in a strange land. Jack saw the tears quietly falling down Sarah's face, and a deep sense of empathy surged within him. He wasn't good at offering words of comfort, but he knew that what she needed right now wasn't empty words, but the presence of someone willing to listen. Don't worry, Jack said, his voice softer. You'll be okay. You won't be here long. When the storm passes, I'll help you find your way back. Sarah looked at him, a strange feeling flickering in her heart. She had heard many people say that in the West. One could find peace and hope amidst the hardships, but now, standing before a stranger like Jack, she truly felt that. She felt safe in the warmth of his care for her, even though she still didn't know what the future would hold. In the days that followed, Jack Dalton took care of Sarah with dedication. He cooked for her, helped her regain her strength, and shared stories about life in the West. Though Sarah was still exhausted and worried about her future, she began to feel lighter in the genuine concern Jack showed for her. Their relationship gradually developed, while there were no romantic declarations. The bond between them was built through simple actions, a meal, a gentle smile, and care from both sides. As the days passed, a subtle yet profound change began to blossom within both of them. The snowstorm outside had eased, but the snow still fell thickly, covering the world like an endless white blanket. Inside Jack Dalton's cozy cabin, the atmosphere gradually warmed, not only thanks to the crackling fire in the hearth, but also because of Sarah Whitaker's presence. With each passing day, Sarah felt a shift within herself both physically and emotionally. She no longer felt like a lonely traveler in a strange land. Slowly, she began to realize that perhaps she had found a truly safe place, a place where she could restore her trust after all the pain and disappointment. Today, as Jack brought her a simple breakfast, the atmosphere between them felt lighter and more intimate. She was no longer just a woman abandoned in a snowstorm, but someone cared for and listened to by Jack. Looking at the wooden bowl in her hands, Sarah felt a wave of emotion. The lonely days, the hopeful letters from Caleb Dillard, now felt like painful memories. And here she was, in a warm home, with a man she had never met before. But it was his presence, his kindness in every small gesture, that made her feel like she was no longer alone. "You're really kind to me," Sarah said softly. her eyes fixed on the dancing flames in the fireplace. Jack paused for a moment, then shrugged slightly and replied, "I haven't done much. No one should have to endure a snowstorm alone." Sarah sensed the humility in his words, but it also warmed her heart. She didn't know if she was looking for something more in Jack's words, but the feeling was gentle and comforting. She looked into his eyes, and a question had been growing in her mind over the past few days. "Jack, why do you live alone like this? Do you have a family?" The question made Jack stop for a second. He hadn't expected Sarah to be concerned about his life, but it also made him realize that, though they'd only known each other a short time, her care had become an important part of his days. "My wife and daughter passed away in an accident over 10 years ago," Jack replied, his voice quieting, his eyes seeming to lose some of their usual light. "Since then, it's just been me, the horses, and these fields." Sarah was silent, listening to his story. She didn't know what to say, but part of her felt a deep sorrow thinking about the loss Jack had endured. She understood that some losses could never be replaced by anything, and perhaps loneliness was an inevitable part of his life. She wanted to share her own pain with him, but the words seemed to escape her. "So, you don't want to find someone else?" Sarah asked, trying to keep the mood light. Jack looked into her eyes, a flash of surprise crossing his face. "I don't know," he replied, a small smile forming on his lips. "I've never really thought about it. Maybe it's because I don't want anyone to have to endure my loneliness." Sarah nodded, understanding Jack's feelings. She, too, had had hopes and dreams of a new life, only to have them shattered in an instant. She had thought she would find love and care in the West, but now she knew that love wasn't something easily found. Sometimes the things we seek show up when we least expect them. "Thank you," Sarah said softly, her eyes filled with gratitude. "If it weren't for you, I don't know where I'd be." Jack simply nodded, saying nothing more. He knew that these words of thanks might not fully express what Sarah felt, but he didn't need to say much. This girl, despite the suffering and disappointment she had endured, had a strange strength he couldn't help but feel. The next day, when the snowstorm had finally stopped and the sun began to rise, Sarah felt stronger. She was no longer the fragile woman Jack had found in the snowstorm, but a woman who wanted to stand on her own 2 feet. She wanted to find a reason to live, to find joy and hope again. "Jack, I want to go outside," Sarah said, looking toward the window, where the warm light began to shine through. "I want to see the world outside again." Jack looked at her for a moment, then stood up. "You want to go outside, but you're still not fully recovered." "It's okay. I just want to take a walk," Sarah replied, offering a small smile. "This is the first time I've felt no fear standing in such an open space." Jack watched her with care in his eyes, but he also understood that her desire to go outside was a sign of her recovery. She needed to find her freedom again. He nodded gently and stood with her, walking outside into the snow-covered fields, where there was nothing but the stillness and raw beauty of nature. As they stood on the hilltop, gazing out at the vast landscape of redwood hills, Sarah felt a strange yet freeing sensation. She no longer felt trapped in the pain of her past, but instead felt like she could start fresh. "Thank you, Jack," Sarah said, her voice full of gratitude. "Maybe I've found a reason to live." Jack looked at her, sensing the change in her eyes and her smile. He said nothing, simply standing there, enjoying the peaceful moments with her in the light of a new day. The next day, the sunlight filtered through the hazy snow clouds, creating a picturesque yet challenging scene. Jack Dalton and Sarah Whitaker continued to live in the peace of the small cabin, surrounded by the aftermath of the snowstorm. The snow still blanketed the hilltops and fields, but the atmosphere inside the house had no longer felt cold and gloomy. Every day, they grew to understand each other more through small conversations, warm meals, and working together. Today, Jack decided to teach Sarah how to take care of the horses. You see, Jack said as he led Sarah to the stable, it's not just the hard work on the farm. It's also about taking care of each animal, helping them get through this harsh winter. They stood there, surrounded by the snow-covered stalls where the horses grazed from their feeding troughs. Sarah looked at the horses with curiosity and delight. She had heard about ranching in the West, but she never imagined she'd be directly involved in it. The experience felt new to her, and it sparked a sense of motivation. She realized that not only was Jack an important part of this life, but the horses and the work of caring for them also played a crucial role in his life. Caring for these horses takes patience, Jack continued, wiping sweat from his forehead while pointing at a large black horse with a powerful presence. They're not easy to manage, but once you bond with them, they become companions you can't do without. Sarah nodded, trying to remember Jack's instructions. She wasn't very experienced in caring for animals, but with each step and each motion Jack showed her, she gradually learned how to work with them. Not only did she find satisfaction in this work, but she also felt a new connection to nature and the horses, whom Jack considered his closest friends. After a long day of hard work on the farm, they returned to the cozy cabin. Sarah felt tired, but also deeply happy. What seemed like difficult tasks gave her a sense of pride, as if she was finding herself again amid the loneliness and sorrow of her past. "Thank you for teaching me about the horses," Sarah said, sitting by the fire with a warm cup of tea in her hands. "I never thought I'd be able to do these things, but now I feel like I'm finding a part of myself." Jack sat across from her, his eyes watching her intently. A soft smile appeared on his lips, a smile Sarah had never seen before, genuine and warm. "Thank you for being willing to learn. Not everyone can work with these horses." A sweet silence settled over the room, only interrupted by the crackling of the fire and the warmth from the oil lamps. Yet, inside Jack, something was shifting. He felt a connection between himself and Sarah, a relationship he couldn't explain with words, but one that was clear in his heart. She was no longer just the woman abandoned in the snowstorm. She had become an important part of his life. Sarah, though reluctant to admit it, felt the same. She wasn't one to easily open up, but Jack's care and attention made it impossible for her heart to ignore. His words of encouragement, the quiet moments they shared while working together on the farm, all made her feel like she was no longer alone. She found comfort not just in their conversations, but in the simple acts of care Jack gave her. One evening, as night fell and the sky outside grew dark, Sarah gazed out the window, her eyes distant. She had once dreamed of a new life, a brighter future when she started her journey west. But now, she realized that life didn't always give you what you expected it could offer, unexpected opportunities and people you never imagined. Jack wasn't the man she'd been searching for, but he was exactly who she needed. Jack. Sarah spoke, her voice gentle but determined. I want to stay here longer. I can't go back to the life I once lived. Maybe I've found where I belong." Jack turned to look at Sarah, his eyes full of surprise, but also understanding. He had seen the change in her eyes, a change that didn't need many words, just the way she lived, the way she faced this new life. "Don't worry, Sarah. You can always stay here, as long as you want to." Those words felt like a promise that didn't need much said, because actions were enough. Sarah felt like a weight had been lifted. She was no longer the woman abandoned in the snowstorm. She was part of this place, part of the life she had found in Redwood Hills. With each passing day, Sarah and Jack grew closer. They were no longer just two people living together, but companions on this journey of life. The mornings spent working together on the farm, the evenings by the fire, the gentle yet meaningful conversations, these moments slowly began to connect two lonely hearts. Time passed like a gentle river, unhurried, yet filled with small, profound changes. Jack Dalton and Sarah Whitaker had gradually become an inseparable part of each other's lives. However, life in Redwood Hills was not always as peaceful as they had hoped. While the snowstorm had passed, the future still held challenges they couldn't predict. The warm mornings by the fire, the simple conversations, seemed like a part of their everyday life, but the world outside could always throw challenges at them that they couldn't foresee. One afternoon, as the sunset began to fade behind the distant mountains, Jack and Sarah were walking around the farm, checking the day's work. They had grown accustomed to working together, sharing endless stories, and sometimes just silently walking side by side, enjoying the quiet of this space. However, today, a sudden cold gust of wind blew through, as if reminding them that even though the snowstorm had passed, the nature around them was still unpredictable. "This wind feels stronger," Sarah said, glancing back at Jack, a hint of concern in her eyes. "Do you think another storm is coming?" Jack stopped, gazing into the distance where the sky had turned a grim shade of gray. He could feel the shift in the air, the stillness before the storm. "Maybe," Jack replied, his voice deepening. "The West never lacks surprises." Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Though she had already endured one snowstorm, part of her still felt unsettled. The unknown kept her on edge. She turned back to Jack, and this time, his gaze was no longer cold or distant like when they first met. Instead, he looked at her with care and reassurance. She couldn't help but feel that warmth. When they returned to Jack's cabin, the wind began to pick up, howling through the doors and windows. Though the house was sturdy, the eerie whistle of the wind made the space inside feel fragile. Jack quickly shut the door and hurriedly added more logs to the fire, trying to keep the house warm. Sarah went into the kitchen to help him prepare dinner. She could feel the shift in the atmosphere, as though everything was bracing itself for a new challenge they would soon face. As dinner was nearing completion, Jack glanced out the window once more. Night had fallen, and the sky outside was dark, with no traces of the sunset. Thick clouds covered the sky, and the wind's howl was growing louder. "There's definitely going to be another storm," Jack said, turning to face Sarah, his expression serious. "We'll need to be ready." "So what do we do?" Sarah asked, a wave of worry rising within her. "If this storm is as bad as the last one, do you think we can make it through?" Jack looked at her, his gaze resolute. "We're not just going to survive, Sarah. We're going to face it together, and if need be, I'll protect you." His words rang through the quiet of the house like a promise, a commitment that didn't require any more words. Sarah felt warmth in her heart. Not only did she find protection in Jack's words, but she could also sense his inner strength. He wasn't a man easily defeated by adversity. That was something she had learned in the time they had spent together. But it wasn't just physical preparation that Sarah realized she needed. In that moment, she understood that she also had to prepare herself mentally. This storm wasn't just a test from nature, it was a challenge for herself as well. She needed to learn how to face difficulties, how not to give up when things got tough. And maybe that's exactly why she was brought to Redwood Hills. After dinner, Jack and Sarah sat together, looking out the window. Snow had started to fall again, but this time, the storm no longer scared Sarah. Instead, she felt a strange peace knowing Jack was by her side. No matter what storm came, they would stand together. The next day, when the snowstorm finally hit, Jack and Sarah worked side by side throughout the long day. They repaired the roof, cleared the thick layers of snow from the yard, and prepared everything they needed to withstand the storm. Though the work was exhausting during those hours of labor, Sarah felt like she no longer was a stranger in this desolate land. She had found a place to belong. As evening fell, they sat by the fire, holding hot cups of tea. The firelight flickered on their faces, casting a warm and peaceful glow. Sarah looked at Jack, sensing the change within herself. She had not only found safety in his home, but she had also found peace within herself. "Jack," Sarah spoke softly, her voice gentle. I used to think I'd never find a place like this, but now I've found it here. With you?" Jack looked at her, his eyes quiet, but something in his gaze made Sarah feel lighter. "I feel the same," he said, his voice warm. "There are things we can't find right away, but once we do, we'll know it's where we truly belong." With Jack's quiet but profound words, Sarah felt a new sense of faith rise within her, not just about her new life in Redwood Hills, but about love, empathy, and relationships built on kindness and care. She was no longer afraid, and for the first time in her life, she truly felt like she had a place to call home. Winter in Redwood Hills stretched on, the snow blanketing the fields and hills. Jack Dalton and Sarah Whitaker had grown accustomed to their new life in this land. Together, they worked hard each day, keeping the farm in good condition and facing the challenges nature threw their way. Yet, even though things seemed peaceful, Jack knew that this life was not always going to be easy. There was a strange shift in the air, and Jack felt that something was about to happen, something that both he and Sarah would have to face. One morning, as the first rays of daylight began to pierce through the snowy clouds, Sarah stepped outside, breathing in the fresh air. She felt stronger, her heart lighter since deciding to stay in Redwood Hills. The tasks on the farm had gradually become an inseparable part of her life. She had learned so much from Jack how to care for the horses, how to garden, and, most importantly, how to live independently and with strength. Jack was still inside, busy organizing the supply storage. Sarah walked toward the stables, where she spent most of her time every day. The horses had become her loyal companions, just as they had been Jack's for all these years. She watched them grazing, feeling the peace and stability they brought. But deep inside, she felt an undeniable sense of unease, a feeling that what she had here might not be permanent. When Jack stepped outside and saw Sarah standing there, he walked over to her, his gaze still full of concern. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice calm. Sarah turned to look at him, a hint of confusion in her eyes. "I'm not sure," she replied, her gaze still on the vast field ahead. "Maybe I'm worried about something I can't put into words." Jack looked at Sarah for a moment, realizing she was carrying a worry she hadn't shared with him. He didn't want to pressure her into speaking, but he also knew that a good relationship couldn't exist without trust and openness. "You know, there's no need to hide anything if you're feeling off. We've been through a lot together, and I'll always be here to help." Sarah looked at Jack, feeling the sincerity in his eyes. "I know. It's just, I've been thinking about the future," she said. "Is this where I truly belong? Or am I just running away from old pain? I can't be sure anymore." Jack fell silent, listening to Sarah's words. The questions she asked were also questions he had asked himself during the years he had spent living alone here. Their life in Redwood Hills was simple and peaceful. But was this the place where they could truly start over? "Could this peace really last, Sarah?" Jack began, his voice low and thoughtful. "I can't answer all of your questions, but I know one thing. This is a place where you can find peace. You've weathered the snowstorm, and now, together, we can face whatever challenge comes our way, as long as we work together." Jack's words made Sarah feel lighter. She no longer had to fight her worries alone. She knew that, even though there were questions without answers, at least she didn't have to face them in solitude. The next day, an unwelcome piece of news came their way. A letter arrived in Redwood Hills from someone named Frank Dillard, a man from whom Sarah had once received letters full of promises. The letter stated that Caleb Dillard had returned and wanted Sarah to come back to where she had first traveled. This news was a shock to Sarah, and when she held the letter in her hands, all the emotions inside her seemed to deflate. Jack noticed the change in Sarah's expression as she read the letter. She didn't say anything, just silently looked at the hastily written words. Worry appeared on Sarah's face. "Jack, I don't know what to do with this," she said, her voice full of uncertainty. "He wants me to come back. I don't know if I can go back there, or if I should stay here." Jack approached Sarah and placed a hand on her shoulder to reassure her. "Sarah, this is your decision. I can't make it for you, but I'll stand by you, no matter where you choose to go." Sarah looked up at Jack, feeling the warmth of his hand on her shoulder. She couldn't make a decision right away, but she knew that the most important thing right now was not to run away from her emotions and the decisions she had to make. In the days that followed, Sarah continued to think about the letter and the decision she had to make. Each day, she worked with Jack on the farm, shared small stories with him, but inside, the worry continued to grow. Her past couldn't be easily forgotten, and even though Redwood Hills felt like home, she couldn't stop wondering if she could truly leave the past behind and start a new life. Then, one evening, a new storm hit, stronger than ever before. Snow fell heavily, swept by bone-chilling winds. Sarah and Jack went inside, quickly securing the windows and doors. Inside the warmth of the cabin, they sat by the fire, silently. The howling wind outside seemed to remind them that no matter how life changed, challenges would always come. But in this moment, with Jack by her side, Sarah no longer felt alone in facing it all. She felt the safety, the companionship she had never known before, and that was exactly what she needed to make her decision. A week had passed since Sarah Whitaker received the letter from Frank Dillard. Each day, she had been thinking about it. The letter hit her like a crashing wave, pushing aside everything she had built in the days since arriving in Redwood Hills. Life here was everything she had, but her past kept pulling at her. Dillard, The man she had once trusted and hoped for was now extending an invitation for her to return. The snowstorm from the previous week had passed, and the sky was now clear, with the golden light of the morning shining on the snow-covered ground. However, inside Sarah's heart, the sky remained dark and unclear. She stood by the window, staring outside, her eyes filled with thoughts and concerns she could not share. Jack walked up to her, his gaze filled with concern, not asking a word, but enough for Sarah to feel his strong presence. He didn't ask about the letter, but Sarah knew that things had changed, not just because of the letter, but because of how she felt about Jack. Her feelings for him were no longer just gratitude. They had grown into a deep connection, a bond she had never felt before. "Jack, I need to talk to you." Sarah turned around, her eyes filled with determination. Jack stood still, looking at her and nodding. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Sarah sighed, feeling a tightness in her chest. "About the letter, about Dillard. I don't know what to do anymore." Jack said nothing, stepping closer and gently placing his hand on her shoulder. "Sarah, you don't have to make a decision right away. The most important thing is that you do what feels right for you." Jack's words made Sarah feel lighter. She had always thought she needed to make a quick decision, but now she realized that allowing herself time to think was essential. She didn't have to rush into any decision or respond to calls from her past. "But I don't know if I can go back," Sarah said, her voice low and sad. "I thought I had found where I belong here, but that letter makes me feel like I'm caught between two worlds. Dillard is my past, and I don't know if I can go back there without losing myself." Jack looked at Sarah, a deep understanding in his eyes. "The past stays behind us. Sarah, it can't be changed, but what you choose to do with the present is what matters. You can continue living in the past, or you can build a new future." Sarah looked at Jack, feeling the firmness in his words. His words felt like a gentle breeze clearing the fog in her heart. She was tired of living in the shadow of the past, and she knew she couldn't let it control her life anymore. "You're right," Sarah whispered, her eyes lighting up. "I can't go back there. Dillard didn't keep his promises, and I can't let him decide my fate." Jack smiled, a warm and proud smile. "I knew you would make the right choice. You're stronger than you think." Sarah felt a deep shift inside her. She had made her decision, and it was the biggest decision of her life. She couldn't go back to Dillard and his empty promises. She couldn't let the past shape her future. She had made a new choice, and that choice was to stay in Redwood Hills, to stay with Jack. In the days that followed, Sarah and Jack's life returned to its peaceful rhythm. They continued to work hard on the farm, shared dinner together, and sat by the fire in the evenings. But one thing had changed. Sarah no longer felt anxious about the future. She had found peace within herself, and the bond between her and Jack grew deeper. One morning, as Jack and Sarah went outside to check the stables, Jack suddenly stopped and turned to Sarah. "Sarah, there's something I haven't told you," Jack said, his voice low and serious. Sarah looked up at him, slightly surprised. "What is it, Jack?" Jack hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I don't know when it happened, but I realized I can't live without you. You've become an important part of my life. I want us to continue together, not just because of the work or the farm, but because of us." Sarah looked into Jack's eyes, and her heart tightened. She knew it. She had felt it for a long time, but hearing him say it out loud brought her an immense joy. She walked up to him, took his hand, and without saying a word, her eyes spoke volumes of the love she felt. "I feel the same way." "Jack," Sarah replied, her voice soft but filled with confidence. "I've found where I belong." They stood silently in the vastness of Redwood Hills, hand in hand, not needing to say anything more. They both knew that their decision had brought them together, and nothing would ever tear them apart. But deep inside, Sarah knew that they would still face many challenges ahead. Their story wasn't over. Every day, every step they took together would be a crucial part of building the new life they were creating. And she no longer feared the future, because with Jack by her side, she knew they would overcome anything that came their way. Winter in Redwood Hills was slowly coming to an end, and signs of spring were beginning to emerge as the snow and ice melted, revealing the damp earth beneath. The sunlight grew warmer, the cold winds no longer lasted all day, and the distant mountain peaks slowly became visible under the light. Along with these changes in nature, Sarah Whitaker felt a change within herself. She no longer worried about the future, no longer felt uncertain about the decisions she had made. The new life she had chosen was now starting to take clearer shape in her mind. Together with Jack, she began planning the big tasks on the farm as spring approached. Preparing for the new season wasn't always easy, but with each task they did together, Sarah learned more about Jack and the things he had endured. He wasn't just a strong and resilient man, but also someone who could share peaceful moments in life. One morning, as they worked together in the garden, preparing for the upcoming planting season, Sarah felt a different shift. She had gotten used to the work here, but something inside her seemed to make her think more deeply. Old memories of her family, of her mother, and the hopes and disappointments of the past began to resurface in her heart. "Jack, I need to do something," Sarah suddenly spoke, standing up from the wooden bench where she had been resting. Jack looked up at her, his eyes full of curiosity but also concern. "What do you need to do?" Sarah paused for a moment, then looked directly at Jack. "I need to go meet someone who sent me a letter. He is the man I once thought would be my husband." Sarah's words made Jack freeze. His eyes darkened. Then he looked at her again. "You want to meet Dillard?" Sarah nodded. "Not to go back to him, but I think it's time to face my past. I can't keep running from the things I left behind, and I want to do it once and for all." Jack was silent for a moment, then nodded slightly. "If that's what you need to do, I won't stop you, but I'll always be here, waiting for you to come back." Sarah looked at Jack, her heart filled with gratitude. She knew this wasn't easy for either of them, but she couldn't keep living in the shadows of past decisions. She needed to end the connection with her past in order to move forward, to build a future she had chosen for herself. "Thank you, Jack," Sarah said, her voice soft but full of determination. "You've always been by my side, and I know I'll never forget that." Jack smiled, a gentle smile filled with conviction. "You're stronger than you think. Sarah, I believe in you." After a few days of preparation, Sarah set off. She didn't know what she would face when meeting Frank Dillard again, but she knew this was an important step toward no longer living in the regret of the past. Jack took her to the door, watching as she climbed into the carriage and left Redwood Hills. Though Jack didn't say anything else, in his heart, he knew Sarah needed to face this. He couldn't keep her here forever because he understood that everyone had to find their own release from the past. 1 week later, The cool spring breeze swept through the fields of Redwood Hills, bringing warmth and new hope. But for Sarah, the past days had been the greatest challenge. She had met Frank Dillard once more. The meeting wasn't the romantic reunion she had once imagined. Dillard now seemed like a stranger to her. The promises from the past were nothing more than old wounds, painful memories she didn't want to return to. When Sarah returned to Redwood Hills, she felt completely changed. The encounter with Dillard didn't pull her back into the past. Instead, it set her free. She no longer needed to hold on to those old connections, and she knew that staying in Redwood Hills was the right choice. She had found a place where she truly belonged, not because someone had promised her, but because she felt peace there. The day she returned, Jack was working on the farm. He saw her from a distance and noticed that she no longer had the anxious look she once had. Instead, she exuded a new sense of peace and confidence. She walked up to him, her eyes shining like never before. "Jack." "I met him," Sarah said, a small smile playing on her lips. "I faced the past, and I don't need to go back anymore." Jack looked up, his gaze softening. "How do you feel relieved?" Sarah replied, looking Jack directly in the eyes. "I found what I needed to find. I didn't go back to Dillard, and I don't need to. My future is here, with you." Sarah's words were a strong affirmation, and Jack felt a great joy swell inside him. Not because she chose him, but because she had chosen herself. They had been through challenges together, and now they could build a new future. "We'll continue from here," Jack said, offering a gentle smile. "Together." Sarah stepped closer to Jack, taking his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm. She didn't need to search for anything else. She had everything she needed: love, protection, and a companion in life. And above all, she had found herself. Life in Redwood Hills had returned to a peaceful rhythm. Jack Dalton and Sarah Whitaker had become inseparable companions in each other's lives. The long days working together on the farm, sharing simple but warm dinners, had brought them closer than ever. From those quiet moments together, their bond had grown deeper, not just because of their circumstances, but because of the true feelings they had for each other. However, life wasn't always easy. The challenges of running a farm and the ever-changing nature still tested them every day. Both Jack and Sarah knew that even though they had found each other and built a home in this wild land, life wouldn't always be peaceful. One morning, while Sarah was preparing breakfast in the kitchen, Jack walked in with a thoughtful expression. Sarah looked at him, instantly sensing that something was on his mind. "What's going on?" "Jack?" she asked, her voice gentle, full of concern. Jack sat down at the table, took his coffee, and stared out the window, where the morning light was beginning to shine on the snow-covered fields. "We need to fix the fences around the farm," he said, his voice serious. "The last storm did a lot of damage, and if we don't repair it in time, the coming spring will make things a lot harder." Sarah listened quietly, taking in Jack's words. She knew that life here always required preparation and careful planning. Nothing came easy, and the challenges from nature were a constant threat. But she also felt that, with Jack by her side, they could overcome it all. "What do you think we need to do?" Sarah asked, her gaze steady on Jack. The determination in her eyes made Jack feel more at ease. Jack set his coffee cup down and looked back at her, a soft smile forming on his lips. "We'll do it together, just like we've done everything else. We'll work together, repair what's damaged, and when everything is set, we'll enjoy the fruits of our labor." Sarah nodded, her heart warmed by his words. She had once thought that Redwood Hills would be just a temporary refuge, a place to escape her painful past. But now, this place had become her home, a place she wanted to stay for good, not just because of Jack, but because of the life itself, with all its challenges and joys. That day, Jack and Sarah set to work repairing the fences, fixing the damaged roofs, and organizing the horse stalls. Though the work was hard, in those hours spent working side by side, Sarah felt love and connection growing between them. The quiet moments, when they didn't speak but simply worked together, brought an unusual sense of comfort. She realized that between them, words weren't always necessary, just being there for each other was enough. As the day ended and night fell, a peaceful atmosphere enveloped the Redwood Hills. The soft light from the oil lamps flickered through the windows of the cabin, and inside, Sarah and Jack sat by the fire, enjoying a simple yet warm meal. Sarah looked at Jack, her gaze never leaving him. "Jack, I want to thank you for everything you've done for me. I don't know what I'd do without you." Jack smiled, his eyes full of tenderness as he looked at her. "You don't need to thank me. Sarah, you've helped me see life in a different way. We've been through so much, and I believe we'll get through much more." A quiet silence filled the room, but it was a comfortable silence, full of understanding and affection. Sarah felt that between them, there was no need for sweet words. Everything was already shown in their actions and care for each other. She knew that. No matter what happened, she and Jack would always stand by each other, facing every challenge together. The next day, when they went outside to continue working, an unexpected piece of news arrived that would change their lives once again. A friend of Jack's from another part of the country had come to visit Redwood Hills. This friend, Ethan Hayes, was someone Jack had worked with in the past. Ethan brought with him shocking news. "Jack," Ethan said when they met on the farm, his voice heavy with concern, "there's a big opportunity for you. A new project I'm involved in needs someone with your expertise, someone with experience in land management and farming. Would you be interested?" Jack looked at Ethan, his eyes thoughtful. This was a big opportunity, but it was also a significant challenge. If he decided to accept, it might mean leaving Redwood Hills, leaving behind Sarah and the life he had begun building here. But if he turned it down, he could miss out on something that could change his life. Sarah stood beside Jack, silent, but her eyes filled with concern. She could feel Jack's inner conflict, and she understood that this decision wouldn't just affect him, but their future together as well. "Ethan, I need some time to think about this," Jack finally said, his voice resolute. "Thank you for bringing this opportunity to me, but I can't rush into a decision." Ethan nodded, understanding that Jack needed time to consider. "I understand. Take your time. Jack, we can discuss it later." As Ethan left, Jack turned to Sarah, his gaze full of hesitation. "Sarah, I don't know what to do. This is a big opportunity, but I can't leave this place. I can't leave you." Sarah looked at him, her eyes full of understanding. "Jack, I can't make the decision for you, but I know you'll do what's best for us. No matter what, I'll always be by your side." With Sarah's encouraging words, Jack felt a sense of relief. He knew that whatever decision he made, it would be based on what was best for both of them, and nothing would change his determination, because Sarah had become an essential part of his life. Time flowed slowly but surely, like a gentle stream. Redwood Hills had now become the peaceful place that Sarah Whitaker called home. The daily tasks on the farm had gradually become a part of her life. She was no longer the lonely woman who had come here just to escape the pains of the past. Now, Sarah had truly integrated into this life, and she had a reason to wake up every morning, Jack. Together, they had overcome the challenges of work and life, taking care of the farm, cleaning the stables, repairing damaged structures. They did it all together. The bond between Sarah and Jack grew deeper with each passing day. It wasn't the sweet words, but the quiet understanding and support they showed each other. They didn't need to express their feelings in words, as every action was a testament to the connection they shared. However, one day, a major change came, testing their bond and their decision. When Ethan Hayes, Jack's old friend, returned with new news, everything began to change. Ethan brought with him an opportunity Jack couldn't refuse. A large project, a promising job, with high pay and unlimited growth potential. However, this project required Jack to leave Redwood Hills, the place where he had built a life with Sarah. This wasn't just a decision about work, it was a decision about their future. Jack sat thoughtfully by the window, staring out at the vast fields. He knew this was an opportunity he couldn't pass up, but was it really what he wanted? Or was it just a way to run away from the challenges in his life, to have a clear goal without facing the deep emotions he had been sharing with Sarah Jack? Sarah walked over, gently placing her hand on his shoulder. "What do you think about this opportunity? Is it more important than everything we've built here?" Her voice was tinged with worry, but also full of concern. Sarah didn't want Jack to pass up a great opportunity, but she couldn't deny the fear she felt in her heart. She had found joy and happiness in Redwood Hills, and she feared that if Jack left, she would face the loneliness she had been trying to escape from for so many years. Jack turned to her, his eyes filled with inner conflict. "I don't know. Sarah, this is a huge opportunity, but I can't leave this place. Leave you. We've built everything together here. You are everything to me. But I can't ignore this opportunity without thinking it through." Sarah looked at Jack, her concern slowly giving way to understanding. "Jack, I don't want you to turn down this opportunity because of me. I've learned that life isn't easy, and sometimes we have to make difficult decisions to move forward. But I want you to know that, whatever you decide, I will always support you." Jack felt the sincerity in Sarah's words. She was the one who had given him peace, and he couldn't imagine his life without her. But more than anything, he didn't want Sarah to feel alone while he pursued a great opportunity. He didn't want their lives to split into two different directions. "You understand me better than anyone else," Jack said, his voice low with emotion. "I don't want to leave you, but I can't let this opportunity slip by. What do you think about it? Do you want me to go, or stay here with you?" Sarah was silent for a moment, thinking deeply. She understood that this decision wouldn't just affect Jack, but it would change her life too. Finally, she looked into his eyes and said, "You have to do what makes you happy. Jack, if this is an opportunity to do something you've always dreamed of, I won't stop you. But if you decide to stay, I'll be here with you, building this life together." Jack looked at Sarah, his heart swelling. He realized that, even if he had to leave, he couldn't forget what he had here. He didn't just have a home. He had a strong, resilient woman like Sarah by his side. She was his motivation, his hope in every decision he made. "You've always been the one to help me understand myself, Sarah," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll never give up on us. But if I go, I'll come back. I will definitely come back to you." Sarah nodded, her heart warming as she heard Jack's words. She knew that, no matter where Jack went, he would always return to her, and the most important thing was that they would never be apart for too long. The next day, Jack decided to meet with Ethan Hayes to discuss the project. But before leaving Redwood Hills, he turned back one last time, feeling the fresh, peaceful air of this place. He knew that, no matter where he went, he would always carry Sarah in his heart. When Jack returned after meeting with Ethan, he felt he had found his answer. The project could offer a bright future. But what he needed most was a future with Sarah, building a truly happy life together. He had decided to stay, and the plans for Redwood Hills would continue with her. "Sarah," Jack called to her when he came back into the house, "I've made my decision." Sarah looked at him, her eyes lighting up as she sensed the change in Jack's tone. "What did you decide? I'll stay," Jack said, smiling. "With you, building this life. I can't leave you to face it all alone. You are everything to me." Sarah walked over to Jack, her eyes filled with happiness. "That's the best decision. Thank you, Jack. I always knew you'd choose what's right." They stood together, looking out at the vast fields of Redwood Hills, where they had built their life and their future. Their love and determination would be the foundation for everything they would create in the years to come. Life in Redwood Hills had slowly returned to stability after the previous upheavals. Jack Dalton and Sarah Whitaker had made the decision to build a future here together, leaving behind doubts and unclear choices. Although peaceful days passed, they both knew that this life would never be without challenges. The sky was clear, the spring wind blowing through the trees, but new challenges were waiting for them ahead. Every morning, Sarah woke up earlier than Jack. She had grown used to the habit of rising at dawn, when the sky was still misty with dew, to prepare breakfast and check on the farm's work. However, today, she felt something different in the air. She couldn't explain the feeling of unease, a sense that something big was approaching, even though everything around her was calm. When she stepped outside to check the stables, she saw Jack standing in the middle of the field, his eyes distant, as if lost in deep thought. Sarah walked over to him, asking with concern, "What's on your mind? Jack, is something wrong?" Jack turned around, his eyes weary, but when he saw Sarah, he smiled faintly. "Nothing's wrong. Sarah, I was just thinking about the work we need to do for the new season. This spring might bring some big changes to our work." Sarah looked up at him, sensing the worry in his eyes. Even though he was always strong, Sarah knew there were times when he carried a heavy burden. She had seen signs of stress in Jack many times, long nights when he couldn't sleep, moments when he sat quietly by the fire, but this time, she felt that the problem was not just the work. There was something deeper in his heart. "Jack," Sarah said softly, "if there's something worrying you, I'm here to face it with you. We've been through so many challenges already, and I believe we'll overcome them all." Jack looked at her, his eyes full of appreciation and gratitude. "You're always here for me. Sarah, I don't know what I'd do without you." The comfort from Jack's words made Sarah feel a stronger connection than ever. She not only loved him, but she also respected him for his resilience and determination. What they had gone through hadn't been easy, but they had overcome it together. Now, nothing could stop them. However, the challenges came faster than they had anticipated. when Ethan Hayes returned once again. This time he brought news that wasn't so good. It seemed there was a drought heading toward the Redwood Hills area, threatening the water supply for the farms. The fields and farms in the region could face a severe water shortage if no action was taken in time. "Jack," Ethan said, his voice serious, "this drought could have a major impact on next season's crops. If we don't have enough water, everything's going to get difficult. You and Sarah need to prepare." The news made both Jack and Sarah rethink the future. Redwood Hills was not an easy place to live. Every season, every year, brought new challenges to face. However, this time, the challenge seemed more serious than anything they had dealt with before. Water was the lifeblood of any farm, and without it, they wouldn't be able to sustain life here. After the meeting with Ethan, Jack and Sarah sat together in their cozy cabin. Sarah looked at Jack, worried. "What will we do if the drought really happens? Is there any way we can preserve the water?" Jack sat silently, deep in thought. "We could try drilling deeper wells, look for groundwater, but that's an expensive and time-consuming task. If not, we'll have to face a lot of difficulties." Sarah felt the worry in her heart, but she didn't want Jack to see her fear. "We've already overcome so much. Jack, I'm sure we'll figure something out. Together, there's nothing we can't handle." Jack looked at Sarah, feeling the strength in her words. She had always been by his side, sharing every hardship. Every time a challenge arose, he saw her grow stronger, and it was that strength that made him determined not to give up. He took Sarah's hand, his eyes filled with resolve. "Thank you, Sarah," Jack said. "We'll get through this together, just like we have before. I'm not afraid of anything, with you by my side." They both stood up, deciding to face the new challenge together. They knew that Redwood Hills wasn't easy for anyone, but this place had given them everything: love, peace, and a home they had built together. And no matter how big the challenge, they would never give up. In the days that followed, Jack and Sarah worked tirelessly to prepare for the coming drought. They drilled wells, stored water, and looked for the most effective water-saving methods. Though things weren't easy, they always kept their faith in each other and in their ability to overcome any challenge. One morning, as they worked in the field, Sarah stopped and looked at Jack. "You know, Jack, I feel truly strong when I'm with you, no matter how hard life gets. I know we can get through anything." Jack turned to her, his eyes soft as he looked at Sarah. "For you, Sarah, I'll never give up. We'll face every challenge together." With those soft but meaningful words, Sarah felt her faith in this life renewed once again. Redwood Hills wasn't just a place where she found peace. It was where she and Jack would continue building their life, overcoming every challenge life brought their way. Life in Redwood Hills was no longer the peaceful existence Sarah had once imagined. After the snowstorm, new challenges arose. This time a severe drought that Jack and Sarah had to face. Despite their preparations and efforts to conserve water, the prolonged drought made everything harder. The fields were no longer green. Instead, they were cracked and barren. The crops were severely affected, and they realized one undeniable truth: their livelihood was facing a major challenge. Sarah stood outside, looking toward the dry fields before her. She could feel the stillness in the air, but inside there was a sense of tension and worry. She turned to look at Jack, who was tending to the horses in the stables, his eyes distant, yet there was no sign of worry on his face. "Jack, things are getting worse." "The water is running low," Sarah said, her voice filled with concern. "What will we do if the water runs out?" Jack paused, glancing over at her. He knew she was worried, and he couldn't deny that the situation was indeed difficult. However, he didn't want Sarah to see him hesitate. He had been through many hardships in his life, and every challenge had taught him something valuable. But this time, he knew that maintaining Redwood Hills wasn't just his responsibility, it was theirs. Together. "We'll figure it out." "Sarah," Jack said, his voice full of determination, "together. We'll get through this. I won't let you face it all alone. You've already helped me so much. Now it's my turn to do everything I can to keep this place intact." Sarah felt the firmness in Jack's words, but she also knew there was no easy solution in this situation. They had been working tirelessly, repairing the stables, drilling new wells, but the months of water scarcity were testing their patience and their ability to adapt. With this escalating situation, Jack decided to leave Redwood Hills for a short time to visit other farms in the area, seeking better water conservation methods and reaching out for help from old friends. Sarah, though worried, knew this was the only way to find a solution to their current predicament. "How long will you be gone?" Sarah asked, her voice betraying her worry. "Just a few days. Don't worry," Jack replied, his eyes filled with trust. "I'll be back soon." Sarah nodded, a sense of unease rising in her heart. But she also knew that if they wanted to keep the farm running, they had to do everything possible to get through this difficult time. 1 week later, Jack returned to Redwood Hills after being gone for a week, bringing unexpected news. He had found a feasible solution from his old friends, effective water conservation methods that could be implemented immediately. However, during his trip, he also encountered some challenges. The news from other farms made him realize that it wasn't just them facing difficulties. The entire region was experiencing a severe water crisis. When Jack stepped into the house and saw Sarah preparing dinner, he felt an overwhelming sense of relief. How many days had it been since he had felt this way? All his worries seemed to fade when he saw her, the woman who had always been there by his side, sharing the hardships with him. "You're back," Sarah said, her eyes filled with concern. "Yes, I'm back," Jack replied, sitting down at the table. "There's good news and bad news." Sarah sat down across from him, waiting for him to continue. "What's the news?" "The good news is that I've found a temporary solution for water conservation," Jack said. "We're going to install a larger rainwater collection system, which should help with irrigation for the fields over the next few months. But the bad news is that this situation isn't just happening here. The entire region is facing a massive crisis. We need cooperation from more farms, more people, to tackle this issue." Upon hearing this, Sarah couldn't help but feel worried. A water crisis could last for a long time. And what would they do if they didn't have the strength or resources to sustain life in Redwood Hills? But she didn't let herself dwell in fear. She had learned from Jack that nothing was impossible if they faced it together. "So, what do we need to do?" Sarah asked, her voice resolute. "We need to seek support from the other farms, just like I've done. Together, we can share resources and hopefully the situation will improve." Jack answered, his eyes filled with determination. "We can't do this alone, but if we work together, I believe we can get through it." Sarah smiled. Her heart lightened as she heard Jack's words. No matter how difficult things got, she knew they wouldn't give up. They hadn't given up on each other, and they wouldn't give up on Redwood Hills. "I believe in you, Jack." "We'll get through this," Sarah said, taking his hand. Together, in the weeks that followed, Jack and Sarah began connecting with surrounding farms to seek support. They worked with other farmers and ranch owners in the area to share resources, implement water-saving measures, and build a support network. Although this work was not easy, every time they received help from their neighbors, Sarah felt more confident about the future. One early morning, as Sarah and Jack stood by the fire, looking out at the garden, they could feel a shift in the air. The difficulties were still there, but they had found a way to face and overcome them. And with every step they took, their love and companionship became their invaluable strength, helping them conquer every challenge. The months of spring passed quickly, and Redwood Hills gradually recovered from the severe drought. While they hadn't fully overcome all their challenges, collaborating with nearby farms helped ease some of the burden. The new rainwater collection system was up and running, and while water remained a precious resource, both Jack Dalton and Sarah Whitaker could feel the positive shift in the air. Life in Redwood Hills was slowly returning to its familiar rhythm, but now they not only had each other, but also the support of the community. However, not all challenges had passed. Sarah and Jack both understood that life in this remote land was full of surprises. Although the water situation had stabilized, there were still tasks left unfinished and difficulties yet to be solved. One morning, as Jack was checking the stables and Sarah was out harvesting the last of the season's vegetables, they received news that would change everything in an instant. A group of merchants from the east had arrived in Redwood Hills, and they wanted to buy a portion of Jack's land. They offered a high price, which could help Jack and Sarah secure their finances for many years to come. When Sarah received the news, she felt a wave of unease. She walked over to Jack, holding the letter from the merchants, her eyes filled with concern. "Jack," Sarah began, her voice gentle but laced with worry. "They want to buy part of our land. The price they're offering is substantial, and it could help us rebuild our life if anything goes wrong in the future." Jack stood silent for a moment, then turned to look at Sarah. The morning light bathed his face, but his eyes weren't sparkling with joy instead. They were filled with contemplation. "So, what do you think?" Jack asked, not rushing to make a decision. He had thought about this before, but this time it was different. Selling the land could be a temporary solution, but Jack couldn't ignore the long-term future they had in Redwood Hills. Sarah thought for a moment, then looked into Jack's eyes. She knew this wasn't an easy decision, and every word, every choice, could change their lives. "I don't know, Jack," Sarah said. "That price could help us rebuild from scratch if things go wrong. But it could also feel like giving up. I don't want to give up this place. We've put so much effort into building our life here. This land means something special to me, and I'm not sure I can give it up, no matter how good the offer is." Hearing this, Jack's heart tightened. He knew that Sarah loved Redwood Hills not just because it was their home, but because of everything they had built and fought for here. But what worried him more was the uncertainty they were facing. They could survive the current difficulties, but could they continue in the long term without any guarantees? And would financial stability help them find a better solution for their life? "You're right, Sarah," Jack said, his eyes filled with inner conflict. "I don't want to sell this land, but I also don't want us to keep struggling to maintain something that might not be enough to sustain us in the long run. What do we do to protect our future without giving up everything we've built?" A heavy silence filled the space between them. Sarah looked at Jack, her eyes filled with understanding. She knew that whatever decision they made, they would face it together. They would find a way to keep what was most important without paying too high a price. You want us to find a solution without sacrificing what we've built, don't you? Sarah asked, her voice gentle but firm. Jack nodded. Of course. I don't want to sell this land, but I also can't let us keep living in constant worry about finances and the future. We need a new plan. After thinking for a while, Sarah stood up, her eyes filled with determination. Then we'll find another way. We can reach out to the other farms in the area, call for cooperation, or even think about starting a small business to supply agricultural products to other areas. I believe that with the support of the community, we can stand strong without giving up anything. Jack smiled, his eyes lighting up as he saw Sarah's resilience. She never let him face any decision alone, and it was this unity that gave him more confidence than ever before. Thank you, Sarah. I don't know what I'd do without you, Jack said, his voice full of gratitude. We're a team. Jack, Sarah replied, offering him a gentle smile. I'll never give up on you. The next day, Jack and Sarah began putting their new plan into action. They didn't just want to survive, they wanted Redwood Hills to become a sustainable community where people supported each other. They started connecting with neighboring farms, building partnerships, and working together to create agricultural projects to supply food to areas in need. Though it wasn't easy, both Jack and Sarah felt they were heading in the right direction. Each day, they worked together, improving the farm and preparing for the upcoming harvest season. The challenges didn't discourage them. Instead, they brought them closer. Sarah realized that with love and unity, nothing was impossible to overcome. Jack Dalton and Sarah Whitaker had weathered a challenging spring, and the upcoming summer promised to be a time for big decisions. Redwood Hills had started to recover from the severe drought, but the signs of the future were still uncertain. The land, the work, and everyday life were all facing inevitable changes. However, with the strength of unity and love, Jack and Sarah were no longer afraid of any challenge. Over the past few days, they had embarked on an ambitious plan not just to revive Redwood Hills, but to create a community farm model. They had connected with neighboring farms, and now the people in the area were working together, sharing resources, and building a sustainable foundation for everyone. Jack and Sarah both knew that this life couldn't be lived alone, and they were doing everything they could to build a solid future for all. One early morning, as the sunrise lit up Redwood Hills, Sarah stood outside in the garden, watching the lush green fields begin to come back to life. The crops were starting to thrive again, and the dew resting on the leaves brought a soft beauty to the moment. She felt a quiet peace in her heart, as if everything was aligning perfectly. Jack walked up beside her, and without saying a word, simply stood next to her, quietly looking ahead. After a few moments of silence, Sarah turned to him. "What do you think about everything we're doing?" Sarah asked, her voice soft but filled with concern. Jack looked at her, his eyes shining with both determination and love. "I think we're doing the right thing. Despite the challenges, we're on the right path. Thank you for always being here with me." Sarah smiled gently. "I can't do anything but be here with you. I believe we'll get through every challenge together. Besides, I feel like this is our home now." Sarah's words were a confirmation, and Jack felt warmth in his chest. She wasn't just a partner in work, She was his life partner, the one who had shared the hardships and joys of their journey together. However, they still faced an important decision. Ethan Hayes, Jack's longtime friend, had returned once again, and this time he brought an enticing offer. Although Redwood Hills had a growing community farm model, new investments from large companies were starting to find their way to the area. They wanted to collaborate to develop the farm into something more industrial, with substantial financial support. Ethan came to meet Jack and Sarah one weekend afternoon, when they were taking a break after a hectic week. He placed a thick folder on the table, filled with numbers and maps showing the opportunities for growth. "Jack, Sarah," Ethan began, his voice full of enthusiasm, "I think this is a big opportunity for you. These investors want to partner with farms like yours. They will help you expand and bring significant resources to Redwood Hills." Sarah glanced at the plan Ethan laid out while Jack silently flipped through the documents. She could feel the seriousness in Ethan's words, and she understood that this was an offer they couldn't easily decline. However, she also felt a sense of unease at the thought of changing too much of the model they had built. "But if we take this deal, will we lose the freedom we have now?" Sarah asked, her eyes full of concern. "We've built Redwood Hills as a self-sustaining community. Are we giving up the values we've created?" Jack looked at Sarah, then turned back to Ethan. He understood this was a difficult decision. Although partnering with large companies could stabilize their finances, would it change the very essence of Redwood Hills? "We can't rush this decision." "Ethan," Jack said, his voice firm but calm, "we need time to think it over. I don't want to risk losing everything we've built. Sarah, we need to ensure that whatever we decide, Redwood Hills remains the place we want to live for the long haul." Ethan nodded, not showing any displeasure. "I understand. Jack, you both need time, but I believe this opportunity will bring great change to the region. Think about it." After Ethan left, the air in the house grew quiet. Sarah and Jack sat across from each other, not needing to speak much, but each of them felt the tension. This was an important decision, one that could change their entire future. Sarah looked into Jack's eyes. "What do you think? Is this a good opportunity, or just a big temptation?" Jack sat silently for a moment, then responded, "I don't know. But we need to think very carefully. We've built Redwood Hills from small beginnings, and I don't want everything to change just because of a big opportunity." "I don't want that either," Sarah said, taking Jack's hand. "I've seen the change in your eyes. I believe we can continue building it without sacrificing the values we've found here." Jack smiled, looking at Sarah. "You always make me feel confident. Sarah, thank you for always being here with me. This decision will be hard, but I know we'll figure it out together." The next day, Jack and Sarah decided to meet with Ethan again to discuss the terms and conditions of the potential partnership. But this time, they were prepared mentally and ready to present specific requests to ensure the collaboration wouldn't change the essence of Redwood Hills too much. They didn't want to give up the freedom and independence they had found in this place, but they also understood that growth could bring new opportunities. Sarah looked at Jack throughout the meeting, her eyes filled with determination. "We'll do the right thing, Jack, even if it's hard. I believe we'll figure it out." Jack held Sarah's hand, his eyes filled with confidence. "We'll do this together, and I believe that whatever decision we make, it will never take away what we've built." After meeting with Ethan Hayes, Jack Dalton and Sarah Whitaker spent the entire week carefully considering the important decision that lay ahead. The farming community in Redwood Hills had gradually come together, and over the past months they had weathered many challenges, from the snowstorm to the severe drought. But this time, the challenge didn't come from nature. It came from the very choices they would have to make. They weren't just facing growth and financial potential. They were also confronted with the task of preserving the values and freedom they had fought so hard to maintain since the beginning of their life here. Redwood Hills was more than just a farm. It was a community, a place where they could live and work freely, without being controlled by outside forces. But now, the opportunity to collaborate with large corporations could stabilize their finances for the long term, though it might change everything they had built. One weekend morning, as they sat at the kitchen table, the atmosphere in the house was quieter than usual. Sarah held a cup of coffee, her eyes focused on Jack, as if searching for determination in his gaze. "Jack, I think we've reached the point where we need to make this decision." Sarah spoke softly, her voice now full of conviction rather than uncertainty. "We need to think about what matters most. Is Redwood Hills the place we want to be long-term, or are we willing to change for financial stability? Is it worth the sacrifice?" Jack set his coffee cup down, looking into Sarah's bright eyes. He knew she had been thinking deeply about this decision, and now it was time for him to choose. "I understand what you're saying," Jack began, his voice gentle yet firm. "We've built everything from the hard days at the start. Redwood Hills is not just a farm. It's our life. It's where we found each other, and it's where we've faced everything together. But if we stay here, can we sustain all of it? Can we continue living the way we do without a bigger support system?" Sarah listened quietly, feeling the weight of Jack's words. She sensed his exhaustion, his inner struggle between holding on to their values and accepting the big opportunities life was presenting. "You want to stay here, don't you?" Sarah asked, her eyes locking with Jack's, as if looking for an answer not just from his words, but from his heart. Jack nodded but said nothing. He knew this decision wasn't going to be easy. Every time he thought about leaving Redwood Hills, it felt like he would be losing a vital part of his life. But if he turned down the opportunity, could he endure the struggles that lay ahead? "What do you think?" Jack asked, not wanting to make the decision alone. Sarah smiled, her gentle yet determined smile giving Jack strength. "I think we can find a way to sustain Redwood Hills without giving up too much. If we partner with these big companies, we'll have the support we need. But I also want us to keep our values intact. I don't want to lose the freedom we have here. I believe we can have both." Jack looked at Sarah, the determination in her eyes making him feel more certain. He knew that whatever the decision, they would work together to find the best solution. She wasn't just his wife, she was his partner, the one who had shared every hardship and triumph along this journey. "You always know how to make me feel confident, Sarah," Jack said, his eyes brightening. "So, let's try it. We'll partner up, but we'll keep what matters most to us. Redwood Hills is not a place to give up our values." They stood up, and Sarah walked over to Jack, taking his hand. "Then we'll do this together. We'll find a way to not just survive but grow, without sacrificing what's important. Together." The next day, Jack and Sarah met again with Ethan Hayes to discuss the terms of the partnership. After a long conversation, Jack and Sarah laid out clear requests. They wanted to maintain the independence and self-sufficiency of Redwood Hills, but they would also accept the collaboration to bring in financial resources for the future. Ethan looked at them with respect. I understand what you both want. This is a big opportunity, but I also understand that you don't want to lose what you've built. We'll work together to ensure everything stays true to its original nature. Jack and Sarah felt a sense of relief upon hearing these words. Although the agreement wasn't finalized yet, at least they had found a solution that could help them keep what they valued most. Thank you, Ethan, Jack said, his voice sincere. We'll build a new future together, but we won't lose what matters most. Thank you both for trusting me, Ethan replied, smiling widely. I believe we can make this work. Redwood Hills will be a model for other farming communities in the region. A month later, the partnership agreement was signed, and things began to change. Redwood Hills was no longer just a small farm. It had become a larger, cooperative community. Jack and Sarah continued to manage the work, but now they had more resources from their partners while still holding on to their original values. Standing on the hill, looking out over the vast fields, Sarah felt a deep peace in her heart. They had overcome great challenges, and now they were standing at the threshold of a new future, filled with hope and opportunities. We did it, Jack, Sarah said, holding his hand, looking ahead, and we'll keep doing it. Jack smiled, looking at Sarah with pride. Thank you, Sarah. I couldn't do this without you by my side. With each step they took, Jack Dalton and Sarah Whitaker not only rebuilt Redwood Hills but also built their own future. They had found the balance between freedom and collaboration, between hardship and opportunity, and most importantly, they had found each other. This story is more than just a meeting between two strangers in a harsh situation. It reflects humanity and determination in the most challenging moments. Jack and Sarah, despite coming from different backgrounds, found comfort and meaning in love and mutual support. The lesson to be learned is this: sometimes, in life, we need bold decisions, willing to help others even if it's risky, because those actions can change lives. For those in adulthood, it's crucial to understand that life always brings new opportunities, even if they come with significant changes. Stories like this remind us that patience, compassion, and determination can help us overcome any hardship, not only for ourselves, but for those around us. Always keep an open heart and welcome opportunities to help others, because we never know how our small actions might change someone else's life. Thank you for joining this story. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories coming your way.